All right. So we are now recording. I see the recording button up in the corner. So probably all have that too, that shares that you're there. So very welcome. Janelle, I hope you are both well and healthy and safe as you are. As I shared, we are recording point and we will be recording until we get towards the end. Kevin will be kind of managing the documents for us, and if you have a chat, he'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have a question or comment that you want to just throw up on the chat line, he will get that and interrupt me in my usual rambles, and we'll try to answer that. Kevin's bringing up on the screen now a document. And so we're in the third session. And in this third session, we would suggest that this is a good way to begin your third session if you are working with folks. It's a document we use, and it's called How Have You Been Coping So Far? Excuse me. And you've been dealing with grief and challenges and pain for a while now. Think about what you have done so far to cope. How effective have these strategies been? And make a list in the space below. So you give this form to people you're working with. Have them take a few minutes and fill in the different things they've been feeling, what they've been doing to try to cope with it, how effective they've been feeling. Kevin, if you want to scroll up just a little bit so we can see the rest of the page. There we go. So, and then look, nope, not, yeah, there's, nope, go back just a little bit. We lost the top. There you go. So then look at each one and ask yourself, in the long term, how effective will it be resolving your grief and pain? Is it possible it might be keeping your grief or pain going? The example being, if you've been trying to distract yourself to keep from thinking about your loss, is this a positive or a negative long term? So one of the things that we want to get folks to do is each one of the coping mechanisms. Because as we talk about things like denial, well, denial can be an effective management tool for the short term. If things are so intense at the moment, or I'm in the middle of something, I can't really deal with it, I can practice denial and say, I'll think about that another day. You know, it's Scarlett in Gone with the Wind. If I think about that today, I'll go crazy, so I'll think about that tomorrow. Well, for the short term, that's okay, but you got to remember that tomorrow you need to not push it further off. So you begin looking at that. So we want them to take and look at each of the style of coping mechanisms they've been using and looking at it, how effective has it been and how effective it's going to be in the long term. So it might be very effective in a short term, something you might be doing. But if you start to think about it, well, can I sustain that for the rest of my life? How effective is it going to be once I get past this initial pain? So then think about how you might have coped well with other losses in the past. So this is the thing to help folks begin thinking. Unless there's someone who's never had a loss, never grieved the loss of a relationship or a loved one, they're going to have walked this journey previously. So how did you do that, and how did it help? How did that work for you? Currently, what is going well, and what are you doing to achieve these results? And what coping strategies and support do you have available to you? Could you be making better use of them? In other words, looking at it and saying, I've got a community around me, I've got this material, I've got these things, am I using them to the most effect? In other words, am I using a screwdriver when I should be using the screwdriver, and am I using the hammer when I should be using the hammer? Or am I trying to drive a nail with a screwdriver? And am I trying to inject a screw with a hammer? You can put a screw in with a hammer, but it's not very effective use of the screw, and quite often doesn't hold the way you want it to. So we want folks to begin to analyze that. Is that making sense to everyone?
Yes.
Those of you that have yours up, say yes, because I can't see everybody's picture.
I'd like to see a
Yes.
YouTube video on that.
What's that, Kevin?
I'd like to see a YouTube video on that.
Oh, on using the screwdriver and the hammer?
We're
I'm
using
guessing,
a hammer to put the screw in.
yeah, well, that comes from a non-handyman guy like me who's tried that. We won't talk about where that takes you. So,
Well, I just use a butter knife for everything, so.
So yeah. So then as we look a little further down, some areas to consider that you'd help folks to consider. And for those of you that are on this session who are actually managing some grief at this point, these are things for you to look at as well. So social support, speaking to people, family, friends, relatives, colleagues, etc. Again, when you're looking for social support, be careful you don't try to use them necessarily for counsel. I think we all understand the difference between social interaction and counsel. Unless the person is very wise, very trained in grief work and that, often they're not the best people to look for grief counsel, grief support, that sort of thing. Confidence. Be sure of your own ability to cope. One of the things that we want to do is be very honest with ourselves. All of us have strengths, and all of us have things that are not so strong, and all of us have things that we're not strong in at all. So if I look at Kevin, I know that Kevin's very good at interpersonal reaction. I know he's also trained in engineering, but I'm not too sure he knows how to fly the space shuttle. So if it comes to, Kevin, somebody says to Kevin, hey, Kevin, we want you to fly the space shuttle. If Kevin's being honest with himself, he's going to maybe say, well, that sounds exciting, but might need some help in knowing how to do it. So, but we want people to be confident the things they can do, because one of the things that can happen in grief is we can begin to doubt ourselves. We can begin to doubt our ability to function. We can doubt our ability to achieve health and happiness and joy. So we want to remind ourselves that we are competent, not in everything in the world, but there are many things we're competent in and they can help us. Problem solving. Be able to work out solutions to problems. Actually sitting down and looking at the various challenges that we're facing in grief as another problem to be addressed. And how do we find solutions? Self-awareness again. Knowing this grief problem or pain affects you, your body, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We've talked a little bit about that. Knowing that it impacts every ability of you and being aware. Right now we're moving into our 100-degree weather today. And I'm sure all of you are really excited that it's 100 degrees out here pretty quick. Well, being aware, how does 100 degrees affect me? I'll give you an example. In our house, my wife and I, at 100 degrees, I'm perfectly happy to put a hat on and go out and stomp around the yard. When I was younger and I jogged, I'd actually go jog when it was 100 degrees. My wife doesn't do well in 100-degree heat. She kind of turns into a puddle and melts away. So for her to think about going out and exercising at 100-degree heat is not very wise. It's probably not wise for me to do it either, but I tend to like the heat and react better to the heat. So being aware of how it is. And then looking after yourself. Make sure that you take time for yourself. In grief, we can often forget to take care of ourselves, and especially if we are caregivers and we're trying to help other people, we can forget to take care of ourselves. We talked last week about the fact that they tell you in an airplane, if all of a sudden the cabin depressurizes, what are you supposed to do?
Put on the mask yourself.
Put on your mask yourself. Put on your mask first and then try to help other people. Because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody. So this is a good tool that we find that works well when you've had a session or two with people, and you may want to revisit it in a later session too, to look again at the progress they've made. So Kevin, I think we're ready to go.
We have one comment, Marie, about
Yes.
the counseling of friends.
Yes.
And so one individual says that they've received very wise counsel from friends, and they've also grieved the loss of their spouses.
Okay, well, that's good. If the people are able to do that. Often, though, in my experiences, I find that people give what they think is wise counsel, but what it ends up is telling you how to grieve. So they can tell you how to grieve, and that's not necessarily always, remember, everybody grieves individually. But if you've got friends who can give you wise counsel, that's great. I tend to tell people my own experience in telling people, be careful of that, because often our friends try to be too helpful in managing our grief. So we're going to wait just a second while Kevin takes us all the way to the top of this document.
I like your don't should on people and don't let people should on you.
Yes, thank you. Now, Kevin, we want to go all the way up to the first page.
Oh, all the way up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're going to talk about this towards the end. There we go. Now we're turned funky wise. There, up, we're upside down. There we go. Come on around. Okay. So this is kind of the agenda that we use for our third session. And so just bring it up just a little bit, Kevin. This is our leader's guide. And in it, we share with people this third session where we address the wounding that is the result of grief and how the wounds may be acknowledged and addressed if not healed. And so in this, we review our nerves, our norms, we talk about grief wounds, the aggrieved, so that they seek to identify this in this session, the wounds. I'm stumbling over myself. Healing takes a long time and changes us. The individual goals you'll see there, the information losses of wounding to our relationships. So we begin to look at this. So this gives you a sense, and you'll have this material if you don't already have it, and it will show you, and then we have the resources in the session. So Kevin, we want to go ahead and bring up the two styles document. You want to take it up a little higher? Now, we talked about grief. We talked about the pyramid of grief. One of the things we haven't talked about is that there are two general styles of grief. And the way people use grief can usually be categorized into two basic styles: instrumental and intuitive. Actually, the styles exist, as it says, on a continuum, and a person may lean toward more one or the other, but no experience is exclusively one style. And we can find ourselves bouncing between them, and we can find ourselves reverting to one of the two other styles. So the first style is instrumental grief. And instrumental grief is the focusing on the thinking part of grief. This is the part of grief that is the practical side of grief, that often involves problem solving, such as making funeral arrangements, recurring thoughts about the circumstances of the death and how and why, and less emotionally expressive about the loss. This is the one that also we begin to experience a lot when we move towards dealing with possessions of the person that we've lost. So if we've lost a parent, and all of a sudden we have all of their household items to go through, now we're beginning to look at dealing with the tangible possessions they have. And should I keep things? How do I get rid of them? What do I keep? What do I do with them? And so this can lead to a fresh, different style of grief. Even once we've moved past dealing with the practicality of managing the funeral, managing the funeral home, managing closing out accounts, getting death certificates, all of those things can become a problem. And this can be a very difficult thing for some people. I've been doing counseling with an individual, and one of the challenges that this individual had was actually dealing with death certificates. Now, those of you who've dealt with it will understand that you need death certificates to deal with bank accounts, to deal with Social Security, to deal with property. So you need these death certificates. But this individual found that the thought of securing the death certificates was almost beyond capability and would just freeze this person. So you begin to look at that and say, okay, how do I help this person with this point of instrumental grief that is tying into the intuitive grief, but is really a practical matter that's becoming a limiting issue? Well, this person had a very close friend who said, how about I go pick them up for you and put them in an envelope and bring them to you so you'll have them when you need them. Now, that was a solution that problem solved it to help with it. Now, I still had to deal with the fact that the death certificates are in the envelope and they're there, and I have to deal with them. But it took care of one of the instrumental pieces that made it a little easier and more effective. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So it's the kind of guidance that you as a grief counselor can help them with when you find that. So one of the areas you want to look at is trying to ascertain, is this person in instrumental grief or intuitive grief? Where do they tend to fall on the scale? And which one are they focusing on today when I meet with them? So talking a little bit about intuitive grief. Intuitive grief focuses on the feeling part of grief. That's the part that we tend to think about. A lot of times we don't think of the instrumental as really grieving, but it's the strong emotional responses to the loss and a more outward display of emotion and more likely to seek emotional support. See, when we're functioning in the intuitive, we feel like, well, people will come and support me. People want to support me. But over on the institutional side, we sometimes feel like we have to do that alone, or that's my job, nobody else's. But sometimes we need help with that as well. Now, you'll see at the bottom there, it talks about stereotypes. We're always careful about stereotyping. But as a mentor of mine said years ago, the problem is most stereotypes have some grain of reality in them, but they get blown up and carried away. But the more masculine, and I want to change this, Kevin, if you'll make a note, I want to change this before we use it again. The more masculine individual tends to be instrumental in their grief, and the more feminine tend to be intuitive. Get it away from male and female. Because as the more, and when I say that, please understand that's not a pejorative. It's just that we tend to associate certain approaches as being more feminine. The softer, the more emotional, the more caring, the more relational, the more interactive tend to be what we consider more feminine, as opposed to the more pull your socks up, deal with it, concrete. Does that make sense without offending anyone, I hope?
Yes.
Okay. And so we tends to be that way. Well, everybody functions in it, but and working with it. So one of the things, as I said, you want to try to ascertain where the person is in their grief, which style of grief is at the forefront, is at the top, and helping them to address that and deal with that. Any questions, comments that anybody has on that before we move back in to the rest of the material?
Nope.
No,
Okay, don't see anything. So Kevin, we can go ahead and put that one away and go back to the main form. All right, let's go ahead and move on down to the next page. So the first thing here is we begin to deal with myths. There are so many myths that happen in grief and grief management. And so many things that get sold. And this is just one example. This article that you have here lists 6 different myths that the author believes are most limiting for people. And they always start the list with "don't feel bad." The other 5 myths are equally damaging and keep grievers stuck. But the foundation myth, "don't feel bad," suggests that feeling bad or sad is not an appropriate reaction to a heartbreaking loss. It's baffling to be told not to feel bad as you try to make sense of the normal and natural emotions you experience. For example, when someone meaningful in your life dies. Now, it's crazy. But if you think about a lot of the things that people say to individuals who are in grief that come across as, well, don't really feel bad about it, it's okay. Even if you say to somebody, it's okay to feel emotional, right? It sounds like you're being condescending.
More questions on that.
Yes, go ahead. What's the question?
Barry, you're coming across broken up. You if that's Barry, you're on mute.
Yeah, I didn't have any questions.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Someone had a question and it was coming across very broken up. Can you try again, please? Okay, we're not getting that. So maybe shoot it at, go to a chat and Kevin will get us the question then. So again, one of the things that can happen to people is they can feel bad about their grief. And when I say that, it sounds crazy, but people, I can tell you how many times people say to me, I just feel so bad that I'm out of control. I cry all the time. I'm so upset. I'm so angry. And the various emotions, and that somehow they're feeling those is a bad thing. So we want to make sure that we encourage them to understand that there is no bad feeling, and there's nothing bad with feeling sad, feeling down, feeling bad. And I guess even the fact that feeling bad about yourself, feeling bad, does that make sense? I know that sounds like I'm talking in a circle as I say it to myself, but helping them then to unpack that so that they understand it's okay to just feel miserable. And even not to be able to put a handle on why you feel miserable initially. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I'm only seeing about 2 or 3 of you, so I know there are more folks online, and I'm for some reason not seeing everybody. I'm gonna. Okay, well, anyway, we'll go ahead and move on then. Kevin, you want to slide on down to the next sheet? The fourth myth that this author provides us, and this is the one we really want to talk about, is that time heals all wounds. We talked about in our first couple of sessions that grief does not go away. The grief that we feel at a major loss never leaves us because it is a wounding. It is a wounding to our psyche, to our soul, to our emotional self, and those wounds are very real. And some of them are extremely deep, some of them are fairly shallow, but they don't go away. And time in itself does not heal the wound. It can make the experiencing of the wound less. It will cause it to recede where we've done the work so that it slides to the back, but it doesn't just make it better. It's like having someone cut your arm very deeply and saying, well, I'll just leave it alone and let it heal. That is not terribly effective. Generally leads to infection, problems. So one of the things we want to be careful about when we're counseling with people and when we're working with them with grief is helping them to understand that doing the work, addressing it, not just putting band-aids on it and saying, well, it'll be better in 6 months, it'll be better in a year. That alone is not going to really be therapeutic and cause healing for the wound. Sometimes when you are initially talking to somebody, they'll say, well, I know it'll just get better in a few months. Not necessarily. There depends on the level of grief, the level of the relationship. There are people who a year or two later are still working through some very deep issues and very deep wounding that loss has brought. Again, it's dependent upon our own experience, depending upon our personality, dependent upon the intricacies of the relationship we had with the individual that we've lost. Does that resonate? Any questions on that? Okay, let's go ahead and slide on down, Kevin. Another one that we've say is forget about being strong. One of the things that people say is I should be strong, or they get counseled sometimes to be strong. You know, be strong, you can handle it. The fact is, we want to remind people in grief that they are human, and that humans are created for relationship, that we function best in community and relationship. As we talked about on one of our sessions, that children, babies that are not held, that are not in relationship, don't thrive. We generally, the vast majority of us, thrive in community and relationships. Now, not everybody has as many. It depends on your, again, your personality and your makeup. But we all need relationship, and we are human, and so that tends to be that. So we're not always strong. We can't always be strong. And so it's all right, and it's good, in fact, to lean on those who can support us when we're not strong. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever sprained an ankle, or sprained, seriously sprained an ankle, and try to walk on it, especially if you're out somewhere where you need to get someplace. You know, trying to do that without some support is just horrendously painful. Having someone who can come alongside and put a shoulder on you, help you to be able to stand up and move, is a great thing, and it takes a lot of the pressure and the pain away. So one of the things we want to remind people is they are human. And so the loss they're feeling is a part of being human. It's a part of our nature, and that we don't have to be the strong one when we are in the middle of pain. Make sense? Resonate?
Yes.
Any questions, comments? All right,
I will
Kevin.
make a comment. I will make a comment on this. This is Maureen.
Yes,
I
Maureen.
actually did sprain my ankle last Thursday. I saw a bobcat go by my side window, and I
Oh, my
had just had my right leg crossed over my left knee for about a half an hour. So when I jumped up to take a picture, my right foot was like spaghetti, and I got a pretty nasty ankle sprain. But I went out in the garage and got my deceased husband's cane. So his cane helped me walk.
There you go. See, so even with his passing, he's helping you out.
That's right.
That's
You're
a
exactly
great
right. Thank you.
And Maureen's thing there is a great point for us to build on. She was sitting there with her leg crossed, and her leg went numb. One of the things that can happen to us if we don't deal with our emotions, if we numb ourselves, we can end up hurting ourselves psychically, spiritually, emotionally, and even some physical things if we allow ourselves to stay numb because we don't want to feel the pain. Or if we're doing things then coping that aren't really addressing it, but masking it over. So thank you, Maureen. That's great for several things. It helps us to remind people. So we want to remind people, don't allow yourself out of a desire not to hurt, because one of the things that we know is from the moment of our birth to the moment of our death, living creatures seek to not have pain. We seek joy rather than pain. And so we lean towards those things that are joyful, and we try to stay away from those things that are painful. And so we can find ourselves, and your people you're working with can find themselves trying to avoid the pain of the grief. And they can, by numbing it. That doesn't make it go away, doesn't heal it. It just opens it up for other problems to occur. So thank you, Maureen. Kevin, we're going to go ahead and slide on down. So these are some activities that we would do. Now, one of the things that is very helpful with people often is guided visualization, guided journeys. I don't know how many of you have actually practiced guided journeying, guided visualization. So kind of let me know, because I'd like to know where we are in the experience of people. So if you could unmute for just a second and let me know how many of you have actually practiced guided visualization, or have actually practiced leading other people in guided visualization.
I have.
I have to.
Okay, so that's
Yes.
2 people.
No, I haven't.
Okay, and Veronica's waving her hand, so I guess that's 3. Good. Okay, good. Well, that gives me, so you have 3 of you who have had some experience with this. Guided visualization is where we actually have folks go on a imagined journey. And we use this sometimes for relaxation. We use it sometimes for healing process. And what we generally do with that is we have people get comfortable, get in a comfortable position, get where they're relaxed. And we ask them to close their eyes. And then we say, take several deep breaths. And you get people to relax and begin to relax. And then we begin to walk them through an imagined journey. So if I were doing it right now, I would say to you, okay, Veronica, Maureen, Barry, Kevin, Janelle, anybody else who's on there whose picture I can't see for some reason today, close your eyes. And just for a minute, take a very deep breath, hold it, and put it out through your mouth. Take another deep breath through your nose, fill your lungs. Breathe it out through your mouth. And one more deep breath in through your nose. Hold it. And as you express that, let yourself feel yourself getting lighter. Feel yourself relaxing. Feel all the stress coming out of your head. Feel any stress in the top of your head.
And that was like once in a gazillion.
And push it down into your face.
Also, don't forget the temperature change just like I'm humid. When it gets really hot, yeah.
Lupita, is that you? You're not on mute.
Okay, so let's go back. So close your eyes again, folks. You've relaxed. Find any stress at the top of your head, push it down into your face. And take a breath in, and with the next breath, take all that stress and push it down into your shoulders. And with the next breath, then push all that stress you've gathered down into your chest. And take one more breath, and as you breathe out, push that all the way down past your abdomen, push it down into your lap. And now with this, push it down into your legs. And with the next breath in, and then push it down into your feet. And now with this next breath, as you breathe out, push it out into the world. And feel yourself now lighter. In fact, you might feel so light that you feel like you may be even ready to float off your chair. And now I want you to imagine yourself all of a sudden seeing around you a wonderful green grassy glade. And see the grass so green, and smell that fresh air. And listen, there's a bird. Hear that bird singing over there? You can't see the bird, but you can hear it singing. And now just kind of wander in the direction of that bird singing. And all of a sudden, there you are. Look, there's a stream. And see that stream? And let that see the water going by. Hear the stream. Just listen to that stream trickling. And now we're going to come back. So I'm going to ask you to take a very deep breath through your nose, hold it, breathe out. And as you open your eyes, you're going to be back here at this time with us on this Zoom. Now, feeling a little more relaxed? Now in that, if we were going to do the full thing, we would then move into some more guided thing of what's happening, and you might have somebody then see some balloons, and each one of those balloons might have one of their feelers of stress or whatever, and you would let them go, and you would walk people through that. And so you might be seeing that they're feeling angry. So you might have them visualize that anger there in front of them and describe to you what it looks like. And then you might suggest that that anger has evolved into a balloon. And that balloon, you're able to reach out and take that little balloon, and you're able to lift it up and watch it float, 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 float away, and float away from you. So that's one way that we do guided visualization. But I want Kevin to bring up the other one on intuitive guided, interactive guided imagery. You bring that one up, Kevin. Now this, you may need to bring it up a little bit further. There we go. Now this is a little different style of guided imagery than many people have used or practiced. This is one in which you actually have the individual interact with the issue. So a client can be asked to close his or his eyes, allow them mind to prompt a picture that symbolizes the issue of the problem. So the problem is they're angry. They're angry, and I'm just using anger because that's an easy one for us to go to. They're angry with their significant other, their parent, whoever's died. They're angry with them for dying. And so you have them visualize this problem, their anger there. And then using the visualized techniques, the client may then be guided into an imaginary dialogue with this image to explore and reveal its meaning and relevance to their pain, problem, or issue. You see the difference? Here, I would say, Kevin, close your eyes. Kevin, I want you to visualize the fear you have of losing one of your dogs, because Kevin's having pet grief. So then I say, Kevin, I want you to visualize that and tell me what that fear looks like. So then,
Oh, what the fear looks like?
yeah, tell me what that fear looks like, Kevin.
It looks like we're not sure what the next thing to do is, where to go look, trying to figure that out, trying to get people to go in different directions to maybe find the dog.
Okay, so Kevin, I want you to ask that fear why it's there.
Why are you there?
Well, actually, should be here. Probably you would say, "Why are you here?"
Why
But
are you
ask the fear.
here?
So what is the fear saying to you, Kevin? Ask it again. Ask it again. Ask the fear why it's here.
Why are you here? It's there because.
No. I want it to tell you. I want you to tell me what it says.
Oh, what it says?
Yeah. What is it saying to you?
It's here because you're afraid of me.
So again, I'm not going to go any further because we want to keep moving. But you begin to see the difference, folks, and it begins to. It's a different thing. Some of you who've done counseling will remember it's the old technique that we used to use in counseling, where we had two chairs. And you sit in one chair and you talk to the issue or the problem in the other chair, and then you'd get up and change and go over and have the dialogue back and forth. So it's a similar kind of situation that we have. It's the similar thing that we do, and we actually have the person in this guided imagery. We're guiding them to actually have a dialogue with the emotion, with the fear. We would again set up the location. You would take the time, you get the person to relax. You would get them to begin to feel comfortable, and you begin to get them then to visualize what there is. So the pain may be, Veronica, what would be maybe a pain you might be feeling in your grief?
A pain that I would be feeling in a grief. Just the loss that you're not going to see somebody, or
Okay, good.
finality of it. Like, for instance,
Yeah,
the
okay.
example you were giving earlier, that the person couldn't handle getting the death certificate, was basically that's final.
Yeah. Okay. So good. So you might say to the person, okay, they'd say, this is finality. The death is so final. So then you would get them relaxed and you would have them visualize death. And then have them ask death the question, are you really final? Are you really all there is? And have them listen for what death is going to say back to them. So again, it's an advanced grief technique. It's an advanced technique for guided imagery. And you need to practice it if you're going to try to use it. And you need to be aware of the power of it. Because you're going to, if you do it well, if the person gets into it and does it, it can unlock some very deep wounding. But it can also move to some very deep healing. And what we want to do is heal the wounded self in this. So what we're really doing in this session is getting people to understand that they have been wounded by it, that there are open wounds that need to be cleaned and cauterized or stitched, that need to be healed. And there are various techniques of healing that.
Hey, Murray, can I add something here?
Certainly.
So I'm the lady whose husband died in mid-February. And you brought up the point, is death really all that there is? My birthday was last Thursday, and in the morning I wanted to text my kids. I don't have anyone that lives near me here. A photo I had with their dad and me on my birthday together about 4 years ago. So I found the photo, and as I was texting it off, these words came to me. And I know it was from my husband, I have no doubt. And it answered a life question.
Wonderful.
My husband said to me, "It is great in heaven."
Ah.
Now, there's no way I would have conjured that up. And that was the
Uh-huh.
last thing on my mind. And
Mhm.
those 5 words came to me. It was the best birthday gift I could have ever gotten. It is
Wonderful.
great in heaven.
Wonderful. Well, you
Yeah.
see, that's the kind of thing we're talking about that often can happen with this sort of thing, where the person can get an answer like that, that is a wonderful answer for them. Now, people can understand it in different ways, whether it's actually the spirit of that person speaking to you, or it's the memory of what that person would have said to you, or
Oh,
however.
no. My husband called himself a non-practicing atheist. No, he was on his cross the last 3 weeks. It was a horrible death. It was a graceless death. It was a terrible passing. So for me to hear that was a huge blessing.
Good, wonderful. And so, yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying necessarily in your case, but in case, so people listening, some people who might be listening to this say, yeah, well, it doesn't matter how it is. The reality is the message is there for you, and it's a healing message. It's a healing of a wound, and it starts that process. And so it's one more technique that we can use to help people begin to heal that wounded self, because grief wounds us. And that's one of the things to help people that we do in this third session that we do. And one of the things when you're counseling with people, help them understand that they really are hurt. It's not just an emotion that you're feeling out there. You really are hurt because you have lost. And anytime we lose, we're hurt. You've lost a relationship. You've lost a touch. You've lost a sound. You've lost a practical application. And so you've got this loss and you're dealing with it. So helping people to be able to really look at that and to see it and to manufacture it. It's much like, remember last week we talked about drawing the picture of the emotion, what it looked like, and what the emotion would look like, and what you would want it to look like, and then what would you have to do to change it. So it builds along that same line. Any other thoughts or comments before we go back to the other document and get ready to move here, because we've got a few minutes left? All right, Kev, let's go. What's that?
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's tough. Yep. Okay, Kev, go ahead back onto the, let's go ahead and move on down. So yeah, let's go here to the understanding your grief page. That's the one I want. No, Kev, you're go down to back down.
Oh, one more?
Page 9. Page 9.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, because that's still a part of the visualization thing, and you can actually do it for yourself. So this is a worksheet that we use, and it's called Understanding Your Grief. Go ahead and take it up a little bit so we can see the boxes, Kevin. And maybe you can turn it the other way so it's easier for folks to see. There we go. So take it up a little bit. So understanding your problem. So as we're looking at it as the wound, what's the wound? What's the issue that we're talking about? So as we get people to begin to understand that they're wounded and they need to do their healing, it's the same as you go to a doctor. You have to do a diagnostic. So you have to understand what it is before you can heal it. And that's part of what this whole session is about, helping people to understand how they're wounded so they can be healed. So we take these boxes and we begin to look at it. So we probably start with feelings. Often we start with feelings. So what am I feeling? And then what are the physical symptoms I'm having? Am I having palpitations? Am I having numbness? Am I having anxiety? Am I finding myself crying? Am I finding myself laughing hysterically? You know, most of you have probably seen people who in crisis find themselves laughing out of control. It can happen. So then we begin looking at what the behaviors are tied around this feeling. What are my behaviors? How am I behaving because of this? Because of this. And then what are the thoughts that I'm having surrounding this? So again, like the finality that we're talking about, the finality of death, what are the thoughts I'm having about this? What are the things that are causing it? And then you can begin to look at this and diagnose it and say, okay, this is the feeling, and these are the things that are happening to me physically. These are the thoughts that I'm having. These are behaviors. Now, how can I then begin to adjust them, begin to tweak them? It's like a medication. I have a tendency to develop pulmonary emboli. And we discovered that several years ago now, that my blood tends to form blood clots that go and live in my lungs. This is not a good thing. We discovered it because all of a sudden I was having difficulty breathing. And being a typical person, male person that I am, who doesn't necessarily take things to the doctor, I didn't do anything about it till one day I got up to walk from the couch to the kitchen, and I was totally out of breath, and my daughter and wife both happened to be there and said, "You're going to the doctor now." Well, they took me to the emergency room, and lo and behold, I had multiple blood clots in both lungs. So then we diagnosed it, then we treated it, look at what were happening with it, how do you deal with it, what were the things I needed to do, and now I take a medication that I take every day to keep from that happening. The crazy thing was, I only took the medication the first time for a few months, and everybody, including the doctor, said, "Well, you're probably okay." Lo and behold, 6 months later, I had the same problem again. So now we realize that I need to be treated for this on an ongoing basis. That's the same kind of tool that this can be for us, a diagnostic to be used to help with that. And also help us to understand that some things in our grief are going to come back and have to be treated again and again and again. Because as we started, grief doesn't go away, but it can be pushed to the back, it can be managed, it can be controlled, and we can find a new healthy way to live, and we can be healed of the wounds that occur when we suffer great loss. Any other thoughts or questions before we turn the recording off and do just any personal comments that need to be made? All right, Kevin, why don't you go ahead and unshare your screen? That way I can see everybody.
Should I just return that back to Kenya?
No, you just unshare your screen. If you just unshare everything on your screen, that all documents all go away.
The book that you were
You can
referring
stop
to.
recording, Kevin.
I am looking for it. Here we are. Okay.
The book